So let's talk about eating disorders. There are a whole host of eating disorders. What's interesting at the heart of eating disorders is body dissatisfaction. And if you look at this graphic, since the 1970s forward, there's been a sharp increase in overall body dissatisfaction, weight dissatisfaction, muscle shape, breast, abdomen, hips, etc. We're not liking our appearance the way we used to. And there are reasons for that, right? So we're constantly bombarded by images and messages that we have to be thin. There's a drive for thinness. You can't turn on the television without weight loss commercials showing up over and over and over. So there's this implicit message that you're not good enough or your body's not good enough. So we internalize that. But let's talk about some of the eating disorders, right? So common eating disorders are anorexia and bulimia. There are others. There are childhood related eating disorders as well. But let's start with anorexia. Anorexia is when a person is significantly underweight. So they are at least 85% of their expected body weight. So it's a BMI of 18.5 or lower. And despite being significantly underweight, they believe that they're overweight. We estimate that about 1% of teenage girls will be diagnosed with anorexia. And I mentioned, you probably are like, well, why am I mentioning girls? The rates of anorexia are about 10 times more common amongst females relative to males, right? Because again, that messaging, implicit messaging of needing to be thin. Stress is a trigger for the onset of anorexia, and an irrational fear of becoming overweight or losing control of one's weight or becoming obese. That these are factors that drive anorexia. Now, it's important to also note that there is a distorted cognitive piece here, where if they look in the mirror, they see themselves as heavier than they really are. Now, there are symptoms or consequences of anorexia. We see amenorrhea, which is the loss of one's menstrual cycle or period. That typically, when you regain weight, will return within 2 to 3 months. But in some cases, it can be permanent, which could suggest the inability to have children, right? Naturally, that is. There's low blood pressure. There's osteoporosis and osteopenia, bone density issues, digestive problems, and we estimate that about 1 in 10 people die of starvation, suicide, or some kind of associated factor linked to anorexia. Bulimia, where instead of the like fear of like or the belief that one's overweight when they're excessively thin, people with bulimia typically are normal weight or sometimes overweight. And bulimia is similar to OCD in some ways, that it has these binge purge cycles, where a binge is ingesting or eating an excessive amount of food in a single sitting, and then compensating or purging through like forcing oneself to throw up, laxatives, fasting, excessive exercise, things like that. Now, what's interesting as well is that bulimia is actually more common than anorexia. People don't realize that. So that binge purge cycle is stronger. So if a person ate in excess, they might feel disgusting. They might feel bloated. They might have this nagging thought, you got to get rid of all those calories you ate. So that there's a need to compensate by forcing oneself to throw up or whatnot. So that's the binge purge cycle. Now, the damage for bulimia, if one is forcing oneself to throw up, there's throat mouth, teeth related issues. There's stomach ulcers. If a person is using laxatives, they can have rectal bleeding. They can have leakage where they have diarrhea, etc. Now, once again, we see 90% of the cases of eating disorders are female, so there's this disproportionate uh, ratio of eating disorders amongst females. And if you were to look at research, when we were to ask women their ideal body shape, and this study was done with heterosexual people, women will report wanting to be 2 to 3 sizes smaller than guys actually find attractive, which is interesting, right? So this pressure to be thin, 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 it's possible that you're undoing your attractiveness by pushing yourself to be too thin. Now, I'm going to stop the recording there, and then I'm also going to give you your break at this point.